What happens when a global pop icon known for her fearless authenticity sits across from a host famous for her sharp tongue and unapologetic opinions, and neither of them is willing to back down? Before we step into this explosive moment, make sure you hit subscribe to The Truth Narrator, like this video, and drop a comment below, because stories like this don't just entertain. They reveal what really happens when egos, truth, and emotion collide on live television. The studio lights of The View felt hotter than usual that morning. The audience buzzed with the familiar excitement of seeing a superstar up close, but there was something else in the air too, a tension no one could quite name. Lady Gaga wasn't just another celebrity guest promoting a project. She walked in with an aura that commanded the room without demanding it. Elegant, calm, observant, dressed in a minimalist black suit, no outrageous costume, no glittering mask, just Stefani Germanotta, present and grounded. Joy Behar watched her from across the table with a knowing smile. The kind of smile that suggested she had done her homework and was ready to steer this conversation somewhere interesting. The pleasantries began as they always did. Whoopi welcomed Gaga warmly. The audience applauded. A brief montage of Gaga's career played on the screen behind them. The music, the acting, the activism. Gaga thanked them with humility, her voice soft but steady. But Joy leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing with curiosity masked as casual conversation. "So, Gaga," Joy began, crossing her legs, "you've built this incredible career on being different, on challenging norms. But some people say that lately you've become more careful, less provocative, less daring. Have you toned yourself down to be more acceptable?" The question hung in the air longer than expected. Gaga smiled politely, but her eyes shifted, just slightly. "I think I've grown," she replied calmly. "There's a difference between evolving and shrinking. I'm still daring. I'm just daring in different ways now." A light murmur rippled through the audience. Joy tilted her head. "But do you think the edge that made you famous is gone? I mean, the meat dress, the outrageous performances. That was Gaga. Now you seem almost conventional." Whoopi shot Joy a glance, sensing the subtle edge forming. Gaga's fingers interlocked gently on the table. She didn't rush her answer. "I think what made me who I am wasn't the shock value," Gaga said softly. "It was the message behind it. The freedom. The refusal to be boxed in. And I still live that every day." Joy smiled again, but this time it was sharper. "Some might say you've been boxed in by Hollywood. Awards, prestige films, polished image. Has the system you once rebelled against absorbed you?" The audience shifted in their seats. This was no longer light morning talk. Gaga's eyes met Joy's directly now. Calm but firm. "I don't think success means surrender," she said. "And I don't think maturity means compromise." Joy leaned back. "Or does it mean you've become part of the very machine you used to criticize?" There it was. The first spark. A silence filled the studio, thick enough to feel. Gaga inhaled slowly. Her voice remained even, but the warmth was fading. "Joy," she said, choosing her words carefully, "I think it's easy to judge someone's journey from the outside. But you're not inside my life. You're not inside my heart. And you're not inside the reasons why I do what I do." The audience applauded lightly. Joy laughed softly. "Oh, I'm not judging. I'm asking what viewers are thinking." Gaga nodded. "Then I'll answer for viewers, not assumptions." The energy in the room shifted completely now. Even Whoopi straightened in her chair. Gaga continued, her voice gaining strength. "I've never changed who I am for approval. Not at 20, not at 30, and not now. What's changed is that I don't feel the need to scream to be heard anymore." A wave of applause broke out. Joy's smile faded for the first time. "But don't you think your rebellion was easier when you were young? Now that you're established, safe, respected, it's less risky to be authentic." Gaga's expression hardened slightly. "You think it's safer now?" she asked quietly. Joy shrugged. "Relatively." Gaga leaned forward for the first time. "It's harder now," she said, her tone unmistakably serious. "Because now people expect me to be a brand, not a person. They expect predictability. They expect comfort. And choosing not to give that, that's still rebellion." The audience clapped louder. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Gaga didn't stop. "You see the outside, the awards, the image. But you don't see the battles I still fight, with the industry, with public expectations, with my own mental health. You don't see how dangerous it still is to speak up when everyone wants you to stay marketable." A hush fell over the room. Joy blinked, caught slightly off guard by the emotional weight in Gaga's voice. I'm not trying to minimize your struggles, Joy replied more carefully now. I'm just pointing out how perception changes. Gaga nodded. Perception is powerful, but it's also often wrong. There was a pause. A long one. Then Joy asked, quietly but pointedly, "Do you think people misunderstand you?" Gaga didn't hesitate. Constantly. The audience laughed gently, easing the tension for a moment. But Joy pressed again. Or do you sometimes enjoy being misunderstood? Because it keeps you mysterious. That question landed differently. Gaga's gaze sharpened. I've never enjoyed being misunderstood, she said. It's lonely. The vulnerability in her voice surprised everyone. Joy seemed to sense she had stepped into deeper waters than expected. Gaga continued, softer now. People think I create personas to hide, but I created them to survive. There's a difference. The audience went silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold still. Joy nodded slowly, her tone shifting. That's fair. But the tension hadn't fully dissolved. It had only changed shape. Because beneath the politeness, something real had surfaced. Two strong personalities circling a truth neither had fully confronted yet. And everyone in the studio could feel it. This was no longer just an interview. This was becoming a confrontation of perspectives, of identity, of who gets to define a person's evolution, the world or the person themselves. And this was only the beginning. The applause faded, but the tension didn't. It lingered in the air like static before a storm. The cameras kept rolling, the red lights glowing steadily, capturing every micro-expression, every breath, every flicker of emotion crossing the faces at the table. Lady Gaga sat poised, but there was a new firmness in her posture now. Her shoulders squared, her gaze steady, her presence no longer simply that of a guest. She had stepped into the conversation as an equal force. Joy Behar adjusted slightly in her chair, sensing the shift. Her tone, usually playful and biting, had become more measured. But there was something in her eyes that suggested she wasn't done probing. You talk about being misunderstood, Joy continued, her voice calm but deliberate. But sometimes public figures contribute to that misunderstanding. You've played with imagery, symbolism, statements that left people confused. Do you ever feel responsible for the confusion surrounding you? A murmur passed through the audience. This question had an edge, not hostile, but undeniably pointed. Gaga didn't flinch. I feel responsible for my art, she replied. But I'm not responsible for how every person interprets it. That's the nature of expression. Once it leaves you, it belongs to the world. Joy nodded, but pressed further. But when the world reacts strongly, sometimes negatively, do you think, maybe I went too far? Gaga's lips curved into a faint smile, but there was steel behind it. No, she said simply. The audience chuckled, surprised by the bluntness. Joy raised her eyebrows. Never. Gaga leaned back slightly. If I start creating based on what won't upset anyone, I'll stop creating altogether. Whoopi let out a soft laugh. She's got a point. But Joy wasn't smiling. I guess my question is, Joy said, leaning in again, whether there's a line between artistic freedom and social responsibility, especially when you have millions of young fans who look up to you. There it was again, the implication. Gaga's expression changed subtly. This wasn't about fashion or shock value anymore. This was about influence, about morality. And Gaga took that very seriously. I agree that influence matters, she said carefully. But what message am I sending if I teach young people to shrink themselves to make others comfortable? A ripple of applause broke out. Joy opened her hands slightly. No one's asking you to shrink, but maybe to be clearer, less cryptic. Gaga shook her head gently. Life isn't clear. Identity isn't clear. Struggle isn't clear. Why should art pretend it is? The audience was fully engaged now, leaning into every word. Joy exhaled slowly. You're very good at turning questions into philosophy. Gaga smiled. Because the questions are philosophical. A few people in the audience laughed nervously. The tension was becoming electric again. Joy's voice sharpened just a bit. Or maybe it's a way to avoid answering directly. That landed hard. Gaga's smile faded. You think I'm avoiding something? She asked quietly. Joy met her gaze. I think sometimes you hide behind ideas instead of speaking plainly. A collective gasp echoed from the crowd. Whoopi glanced between them, sensing the temperature rising rapidly. Gaga's eyes didn't leave Joy's. Her voice dropped lower, calmer, but far more intense. I've spent my entire career speaking plainly, she said. Plainly about trauma. Plainly about assault. Plainly about mental illness. Plainly about feeling like I didn't belong in this world. The room went silent. Joy's posture stiffened. Gaga continued, her voice unwavering. So if you think I hide, maybe you haven't been listening. The audience erupted into applause. Joy blinked, clearly not expecting that response. I didn't mean to imply. But you did, Gaga interrupted, not aggressively but firmly. And that's okay. We can talk about it. That shift from defense to invitation changed the entire energy. Joy paused, recalibrating. I think, Joy said more slowly now, that sometimes your message gets lost in the spectacle, and people miss the seriousness because of the presentation. Gaga nodded thoughtfully. That's a fair observation. The audience relaxed slightly. But, Gaga added, leaning forward again, that's not on me alone. That's on how society consumes things. People love the headline. They skip the substance. Joy tilted her head. So it's the audience's fault? No, Gaga replied. It's a shared responsibility. But I won't apologize for packaging truth in a way that gets attention. The applause returned louder. Joy smiled thinly. You're very persuasive. I'm very honest, Gaga corrected gently. A beat of silence followed. Then Joy asked the question that shifted everything again. Do you think people like me, critics, commentators, are part of the problem? The audience went still. Gaga didn't hesitate. Yes. The word dropped like a stone in water. A few audible gasps. Someone clapped once before stopping awkwardly. Joy blinked. Really? Gaga nodded calmly. Not intentionally. But yes. Joy folded her arms slightly. How so? Gaga's voice softened, but her words cut deeper. Because sometimes commentary becomes reduction. You take a person's life, their pain, their art, and turn it into a debate topic. A talking point. A punchline. And you forget there's a human being attached to it. Joy didn't respond immediately. The audience was utterly silent now. Gaga continued, her eyes never leaving Joy's. You ask if I've toned down. If I've been absorbed. If I've become safe. But you don't ask what it costs to keep being myself in a world that constantly tries to simplify me. Joy's expression changed. Less defensive. More reflective. And maybe, Gaga added softly, that's why people feel misunderstood. Because they're constantly being interpreted instead of heard. The words hung heavy in the air. Joy inhaled slowly. That's something to think about. For the first time, her voice lacked its usual sharpness. Whoopi nodded quietly, sensing the gravity of the moment. But the audience could feel it. This wasn't just an exchange anymore. This had become personal. And neither of them was backing down, not out of hostility, but out of conviction. Two women. Two strong voices. Two different ways of seeing the world. Colliding in real time, under studio lights, with millions watching. And the conversation was only getting deeper. A strange stillness settled over the studio after that admission. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that feels full. Full of thought. Full of realization. Full of something unspoken that everyone in the room could sense, but no one wanted to interrupt. Joy Behar didn't rush to speak. For perhaps the first time in the interview, she looked genuinely reflective, her fingers lightly tapping the table as she considered Gaga's words. The usual rhythm of daytime television had been completely disrupted. This was no longer banter. No longer entertainment. This was real. Gaga remained composed, but her eyes revealed the emotional weight she was carrying. She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't snapped. But she had done something far more powerful. She had forced the room to slow down and listen. Joy finally broke the silence. You know, she began carefully, I've been doing this a long time. Talking about people, analyzing public figures, making commentary, it becomes second nature. You don't always stop to think how it feels on the other side. Gaga nodded gently. I believe that. Joy offered a small, honest smile. And maybe I haven't thought about that enough. A soft murmur of approval passed through the audience. But Gaga wasn't finished. And maybe, Gaga said quietly, public figures like me haven't always known how to say that without sounding defensive or dramatic. Joy looked at her with curiosity now, not challenge. So what changed for you? Gaga paused, considering. I got tired of performing strength when I actually felt exhausted, she admitted. I got tired of pretending criticism didn't hurt. Of pretending I was untouchable because that's what people expected from Lady Gaga. The audience listened, completely absorbed. I realized, she continued, that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's clarity, and I'd rather be clear than be impressive. Joy nodded slowly. That's not something you hear often in Hollywood. Gaga smiled faintly. That's because Hollywood runs on illusion. And I've lived inside illusions for most of my career. There was no bitterness in her voice. Just honesty. Joy leaned forward slightly. Do you regret any of it? The personas, the spectacle, the larger-than-life identity. Gaga didn't hesitate. No. That saved me. It gave me armor when I needed it. But now I don't want armor. I want air. The simplicity of that line struck the room like poetry. Even Whoopi whispered, Wow. Joy studied her for a moment. You're very different from what people expect. Gaga chuckled softly. That's the story of my life. The audience laughed with her, easing the tension just a little. But Joy wasn't done exploring this new territory. You said earlier that people like me reduce people like you, Joy said carefully. I don't want to be that person. So tell me, what's the one thing you wish commentators understood about you? Gaga's expression softened. That I'm not a headline, she said. I'm a person who wakes up every day trying to do something meaningful with the pain I've lived through. Silence again. But this time it felt warm. Joy nodded. That's fair. Gaga continued, her voice quieter now. When people talk about me like I'm a character, it feels like they're erasing the human being underneath. And that's the part that hurts. Joy's eyes lowered briefly. I can see that. The cameras captured the subtle shift, the tension transforming into mutual understanding. But then Joy asked something unexpected. Do you think fame is worth that cost? The question lingered. Gaga took a long breath before answering. Some days, yes, she admitted. Because I know my work reaches people who feel alone. And some days, no. Because I feel alone. The vulnerability in that confession hit hard. Joy didn't interrupt. I've stood in front of thousands of screaming fans, Gaga continued, and still felt like no one really saw me. That's a strange kind of loneliness. A woman in the audience wiped her eyes. Joy spoke gently now. That sounds painful. It is, Gaga replied simply. Another pause. Then Gaga added, but conversations like this help, because they remind me that I don't have to perform here. I can just be. Joy smiled, genuinely this time. I'm glad. Whoopi chimed in softly. This is why we do this show. The atmosphere had transformed completely. What began as a subtle challenge had turned into an emotional exchange that no one expected. But the intensity wasn't gone. It had simply deepened. Joy looked at Gaga thoughtfully. I started this interview thinking I was going to ask tough questions. And I did. But I didn't expect to get this. Gaga smiled. Neither did I. The audience laughed lightly. Joy added, You've made me think about how I frame people. And that's not easy to admit on live television. Gaga nodded. Growth rarely is. They held eye contact for a moment. Not adversaries now, but two women recognizing something in each other. Strength. Experience. Complexity. But just as the room began to settle into this new understanding, Joy asked one final question that reignited the emotional current beneath the surface. Do you think the world is harder on women like you? Gaga didn't hesitate. Yes. The answer was immediate. Certain. Joy tilted her head. Why? Gaga's eyes sharpened again, though her tone remained calm. Because women are expected to be understandable, digestible, predictable. And when we're not, we're labeled difficult, dramatic, attention-seeking, or unstable. The audience murmured in agreement. Joy nodded slowly. That's probably true. Gaga leaned forward slightly. And when a man reinvents himself, he's called brilliant. When a woman does, she's called confusing. A wave of applause broke out again. Joy didn't argue. She simply listened. And that, Gaga added, is why I'll never make myself smaller for comfort. The studio filled with applause, louder than before. Not because of confrontation, but because of truth. And everyone could feel that this conversation had crossed a line from interview into something far more meaningful. But there was still one last stretch to go. And the aftermath of this exchange was about to reach far beyond the studio walls. By the time the final segment of the show approached, the atmosphere inside the studio felt nothing like the light daytime program the audience had walked into an hour earlier. Something had shifted. Not loudly, not explosively, but profoundly. The producers behind the cameras could sense it. The audience felt it in their chests. Even the hosts, seasoned veterans of live television, knew this episode would not fade into the background of daily broadcasts. This was the kind of conversation that lingered, the kind that traveled. Joy Behar sat differently now, less guarded, more contemplative. Lady Gaga remained composed, but there was a visible emotional openness in her expression that hadn't been there at the start. Whoopi glanced at both of them before speaking. This has been one of the most honest conversations we've had on this table in a long time. The audience applauded warmly. Gaga smiled, a quiet gratitude in her eyes. I'm thankful for it. Joy nodded. So am I. There was no sarcasm. No edge. Just sincerity. But the weight of what had been said still hung in the air, and everyone knew they couldn't simply pivot back to casual topics. The moment demanded acknowledgement. Joy turned slightly toward Gaga. I want to say something, she began. Not as a host. Just as a person. The room grew still again. I realize that sometimes in this chair, I speak about people as ideas instead of as human beings. And today reminded me that there's a difference. So, thank you for calling that out. A soft murmur of approval moved through the audience. Gaga nodded respectfully. Thank you for being willing to hear it. Joy smiled gently. Not everyone would have said it as calmly as you did. Gaga laughed quietly. Oh, I've learned that calm travels further than anger. The audience chuckled, but the emotional current remained. Whoopi leaned in. What do you hope people take away from this conversation? Gaga thought for a moment. I hope they remember that the people they see on screens are still people when the cameras turn off, she said. And I hope they allow themselves and others the freedom to grow without suspicion. Joy added softly. And maybe I hope viewers realize that we're still learning too. Even up here. That honesty struck the audience deeply. As the segment began to wrap, the applause came not in bursts, but in waves, sustained, heartfelt, almost reluctant to end. But the real aftermath didn't happen in the studio. It happened minutes later. Clips of the exchange began spreading across social media before the show had even finished airing. Short videos with captions like Lady Gaga silences the table, Joy Behar left speechless, the most honest moment ever on The View. Millions of views poured in within hours. People weren't sharing it because of drama. They were sharing it because of depth. Comments flooded in from viewers who said they felt seen. From fans who said they understood Gaga in a new way. From critics who admitted they had misjudged her. Even longtime viewers of the show praised Joy for listening instead of arguing. Media outlets picked up the story by evening. Headlines didn't talk about conflict. They talked about confrontation of ideas. About vulnerability on live television. About two strong voices choosing understanding over ego. Backstage, producers told Joy it was one of the most talked about segments in years. Joy reportedly shook her head and said, All I did was ask questions. She did the rest. Meanwhile, Gaga's fans celebrated the moment as one of the most powerful interviews of her career. Not because she defended herself, but because she revealed herself. By nightfall, the clip had crossed international feeds. And viewers who had never watched The View were watching this exchange on their phones, in silence, absorbing every word. Because it didn't feel scripted. It felt human. The next morning, talk shows discussed it. Online forums debated it. Commentators analyzed not what was said, but how it was said. Calmly. Honestly. Without shouting. A rare thing in modern media. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that had unfolded in real time. Sometimes the most powerful takedown isn't loud. It's patient. Back in her hotel room later that evening, Gaga reportedly told a member of her team, That felt more real than most performances I've ever done. And perhaps that was the real story. Not a celebrity clash, but a moment where performance dropped away, and two people spoke without armor. As the episode faded into television history, it left behind something far more lasting than viral clips. It left a conversation people didn't know they needed to hear. And now, as you've watched this unfold, we want to hear from you. What did you think about this powerful exchange? Do you believe public figures are often misunderstood? Or do commentators play an important role in challenging them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep, explosive, and emotional stories like this, moments where truth breaks through the noise, make sure you subscribe to The Truth Narrator, like this video, and join us for the next story that everyone will be talking about.